Act 5 of The Tempest finally brings all of the characters and action of the play together. We also get some of the answers to some of the big questions that began the play. Will Ariel ever get to be free? Will Prospero give up his books to become a leader? And how far exactly is he going to take his revenge? Any answers to those questions? Yes, and pretty far, but he eventually lets it go. That said, the ending creates more questions. There is plenty left unanswered. Will Miranda and Ferdinand have a happy marriage, and will they oversee a politically unified Italy together? Will Caliban inherit the island when Prospero leaves? Will Prospero be a better leader without his magic? We don't know. We will never know. Perhaps the biggest question that remains is whether or not people can change. Can they forgive, and can they live together without seeking to subjugate each other? Humanity is messy. There will be mistakes. People will be ambitious. They will seek to control others. They will be overly naive. They will be unjust. All of this is true. And it's also true that they might forgive each other anyway. In the end, there needs to be forgiveness, whether or not you want it. I'm looking at you, Antonio. So in this video, we're going to focus on the role that forgiveness plays in Act 5. And if that sounds like it's your kind of thing, please consider subscribing and watching other videos in the series analyzing The Tempest. Let's get into it. Act 5 opens with Prospero really feeling his own power. His entire project is finally coming to fruition, and he's ready for battle. He asks Ariel for a report about the king and his followers, and Ariel confirms that they're confined and currently being tortured by Prospero's charms. And then Ariel ends the report in a really interesting way. "If you now beheld them," Ariel says, "your affections would become tender." And when Prospero replies, "Do you think so, spirit?" Ariel responds, "Mine would, sir, were I human." And the tone of this act changes right away. As audience members, we have just experienced the high-energy conclusion to Act 4, with the hunting dogs chasing the drunks, and then Prospero begins this scene preparing for battle. The play has us anticipating action, revenge. We're ready for Prospero to smite all of his enemies. But that's not what we get. Instead, we get Ariel's kindness. We get a plea for tenderness. The entire play has pushed us towards this moment of revenge. All the energy of the play has been pointed in that direction. And then we get this response. Ariel says he believes Prospero's affections would become tender, and Prospero responds, "And mine shall. Hast thou, which art but air, a touch, a feeling of their afflictions, and shall not myself, one of their kind, that relish all as sharply passions as they, be kindlier moved than thou art. Thou with their high wrongs I am struck to the quick, yet my nobler reason gainst my fury do I take part. The rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. They being penitent, the sole drift of my purpose doth extend not a frown further. Go, release them, Ariel." One of their own kind, so he sees himself in them, and with his reason he takes the rarer action, that of virtue. They are penitent and shall be released, though it's good to note quickly that we actually haven't heard much about Antonio being penitent, but more on that later. So Prospero will stop his retribution. That might be surprising, but then something even more surprising happens. Prospero gives up his magic. And before he does, Prospero describes exhaustively, for the first time, the full extent of his magic. The guy apparently could raise people from the grave, so if we ever thought that his magic was some good kind of magic, we should rethink that position. His power, as described in this scene, feels unambiguously terrifying. He truly occupies a god position within the play. And at the moment that we fully learn about the full extent of his magic, he gives it up. "But this rough magic I here abjure. I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth. I'll drown my books." I think it's notable that he brings himself back down to the human level at the same time that he decides to engage in the very human act of forgiveness. Perhaps he feels the inability of human connection to thrive when a power imbalance is so strong. Perhaps he knows that if he wants to rejoin civilization and the social world, he cannot do it as a god who can raise people from their graves. Perhaps he knows that the temptation to use his magic will deny him the possibility of true forgiveness, the ability to let go and become a member of a community, somebody actually in the community and not directing it from some external position. Ultimately, I don't know why he gives up his magic, but it must have something to do with the forgiveness that he decides on just before this and acts on directly after this. We can also read this renunciation of magic as a metaphor for the playwright's release of creative control once his story has ended. Prospero is often viewed as a stand-in for Shakespeare himself, and we can read this episode through that lens. Shakespeare used his poetic imagination, his magic, to create this world and guide this story. But now that it's over, he has as much control of it as the audience. He gives up creative control to the legions of audience members and scholars who will interrogate this story for hundreds of years after the author's retirement and death. The playwright relinquishes control and joins the audience. And as he does, Prospero forgives all his enemies. In the climax of this act, Prospero forgives his brother. He tells Antonio, "I do forgive thee, unnatural though thou art." And notably, Antonio doesn't reply. He never actually asks for forgiveness. He never says thank you, and he never actually repents. The others hug it out and offer words of contrition, but not Antonio. Prospero breaks the cycle of revenge by offering forgiveness to everyone, regardless of how worthy they are of that forgiveness. Prospero also, in the same breath that he forgives, demands his position back. "I do forgive thy rankest fault, all of them, and require my dukedoms of thee, which perforce I know thou must restore." This is not a choice, and Antonio does not verbally consent to this deal. He may forgive, but he has not forgotten. I mean, he actually says that calling Antonio a brother infects his mouth, but he does forgive. And at this point, everything that was lost at the start of the play is restored. Prospero lets Alonso squirm a bit, but eventually he reveals that Ferdinand, the lost son, is alive. He's playing chess with Miranda. They're playing a game associated with strategy and politics, a nice prologue to their future positions as heads of state. Except the first thing that we hear either of them say is, "Sweet Lord, you play me false." Miranda accuses Ferdinand of cheating. So, is this marriage going to work out? Will they be fair and just rulers? It's not something that we can know. Once Ferdinand sees his father, he says, "Thou the seas threaten, they are merciful," which just about sums up this entire play. Prospero threatened, and yet showed mercy. It seemed like everything was lost, but now we know that everything will be restored. Like, for example, the ship that we thought was split in two is actually safe in harbor, and the boatswain appears again for the first time since the first scene, and the presence of this character should remind us of that memorable line in the first scene when he says that there are none on board that he loves more than himself, implying that he's trying to save the ship for himself and not for anyone else. I note this because when Stefano, Trinculo, and Caliban enter the scene, the first thing that Stefano says is, "Every man shift for all the rest, and let no man take care for himself," which seems to be another articulation of the general plot. All the usurpations and ambitions for power that defined the first part of the play and pit the characters against each other have dissolved into hugs, marriages, and general camaraderie. Let no man take care for himself, because every man is part of a community. We're all at sea together. And it's in this spirit of camaraderie that Prospero acknowledges Caliban as his own, his responsibility, a member of his community. There is a common Freudian reading of this part of the play that posits that Prospero needed to get his daughter married and off the island because he's afraid of his own desire for his own 15-year-old daughter. She's become a woman and the only woman on the island, so he needs to get her married off quickly. In this reading, Ariel and Caliban are both external representations of Prospero's psyche. Caliban, in this case, would be the raw emotion and sexual desire, the id. Prospero, therefore, needs to keep that part of himself constrained and in bondage, the part of himself that might be attracted to his daughter. So it is not until Miranda is married off and sent to Naples that he can finally acknowledge Caliban as part of himself. But we don't need to go too far down that path here. He may simply be acknowledging the fact that both he and Caliban have transcended the stories and symbols of power and can both hear the beauty and music of the island that has changed them both. And after he acknowledges Caliban as his own, he finally sets Ariel free, and that takes us to the epilogue, that famous epilogue. This is Shakespeare's final play as lead author, and this monologue is often viewed as the great artist saying goodbye. He's set free his muse, Ariel, and now asks the audience to send him off into retirement. And some people might tell you that Shakespeare would have played the part of Prospero, though in my research I've found very little evidence of that. It seems more likely that Richard Burbage, the actor who usually played the lead in Shakespeare plays, would have played the role of Prospero, so you know, it's a fun theory. It's a hell of a speech, though. The character who has just spent an entire act granting mercy and forgiveness to a bunch of people he has power over turns to the audience and says, "Hey, you have power over me, and I'm asking you for your forgiveness for what I've done. I've enslaved people, tortured others, and coerced the behavior of still more. I've tricked people into thinking that their fathers and sons were killed. I've created and performed stories that have affirmed oppressive power structures. But I've given all that up. Can you clap your hands and forgive me?" It's heavy. And so much of the final two acts has been about the power of imagination, of dreams, of art. And so I think that we can actually read this as a retirement speech. Shakespeare has produced a show that seemed real while we were in it. As real as the banquet dinner looked to Sebastian. As real as the Tempest felt to the boatswain. As real as the mosque felt to Ferdinand. And now, like Ferdinand, we need to be told that these were just actors. This was just a dream. But aren't we the stuff that dreams are made on? Those dreams, these shows, they have power. Shakespeare, like Prospero, used that muse, this magic, to manipulate our feelings, make us feel differently about the world. And that power, it's dangerous. And Shakespeare's letting that power go. He's breaking his staff, walking away from the stage. And as he does, he asks us to reflect on those dreams that he's presented us with, those plays he's written for us, and pass judgment on him. The man who has judged all the others asks us now to judge him. I love it. And that's all for this one. But there will be one more Tempest video. In that video, I'm going to go through post-colonial readings of the play, so make sure that you're subscribed for when I release that one, and thank you for watching this series.